Actually, my grandfather got me into it, and in 2010, I believe, I moved to North Carolina, and while I was stationed there, I took up gardening. I had an acre piece of property, and my first year it turned out awful. I couldn't grow anything, and so I spent that winter combing through the internet, and I don't have a degree, but I've a lot of trial and error, mostly error, but I have managed to do all right. My second year gardening there, after spending the winter learning how to do it, I in a 40 by about 40 by 20 garden area. I grew so many vegetables. I canned enough for the whole year for my family and gave a whole bunch away because I didn't know what to do with it. And I had a large bumper crop. Then I learned how to can everything, so wasn't quite prepared. But here, when I got to catch can, I wanted to garden, and you have some very challenging conditions here sometimes. So I figured out where the sun shone on my little bit of backyard and porch, and that's got permission from my landlord to build the garden beds there, and then saw the price of soil, and I had done some lasagna gardening in North Carolina around my chicken coop and rabbit cages, and it worked pretty well. So I decided to try it, and it was actually pretty easy. I hate to spill some of this on the carpet, but I passed it around. So all this started out as I built some 12 by 3 foot beds, 12 inches high, and laid cardboard down to suppress the weeds in the grass, and pretty much use this method here. It's just layering green and brown materials, and I was able to acquire most of them for free with a little bit of searching. So I started with the cardboard, and then cut down some alders that were on the property there, and just cut the branches up smaller and use that for my drainage area because of all the rain we get here. And so I suppressed the weeds, had good drainage underneath that, another brown material, and I'd been saving up some kitchen scraps, and realized that wasn't. I couldn't produce enough green material and kitchen scraps to fill these beds. I got in contact with the produce department at Safeway, and I was able to get all the green stuff I needed for several weeks. I just went in and they had a garbage can full of old lettuce, and it was still nice and green, a little wilted to sell people to eat, but it was perfect for what I needed, and laid down a layer there. And for the brown material, that took me a little bit to find, but Knutson Cove, the logging operation they have down there, there's sawdust. You could pile it as tall as a house, and that's where I got a lot of my brown material. That turned out to be initially the hardest to find. After I got in contact with the grocery store, it was no problem filling the green material. And also, here being an island, there's endless amounts of seaweed that wash up on the beaches and kelp. And I realized pretty quick that when that stuff starts to decompose, it looks like slime, and it will completely turn an aerobic compost heap to anaerobic. As soon as it creates that layer, it blocks all oxygen coming in and out, and everything goes anemic underneath it.
Wait, I'm sorry, say that again?
I'm sorry.
No, it's important. I just say
So compost piles, if you have a normal compost pile, you do the same formula basically, green and brown materials, and then you aerate it. And that supplies enough oxygen to the microbes that are breaking down your materials to turn it in from kitchen scraps to compost. An anemic pile, you can use anemic pile. That means no oxygen's getting to it. It's a stagnant environment. Most microbes can't live in that low of an oxygen environment, so it takes a lot longer for it to decompose in an anemic environment. So after I killed the first layer of my compost, I raked that off and started adding more wood chips. Anytime I added the kelp, I would add 50-50 of brown material. I also use shredded paper quite a bit from the office as a brown material. And mixing the kelp with a more coarse, high carbon brown material like paper or wood chips, it had enough. That coarse material was able to create air spaces where it wouldn't completely coat the pile in a layer of goo, for lack of a better word. So I continued with that until I had a 12-inch high garden bed, and I knew that it was going to decompose and shrink. So I went about 18 inches high, just 2 inches of this material, of green material, brown material. I'm sorry, also on the green materials, I have a list here of all the stuff that I used. The coffee shops, they can fill a 3-gallon bucket in 2 days of coffee grounds. And I Ravens Brew got 2 blue 3-gallon buckets, wrote my name and phone number on there, and I went there every other day with a full bucket of coffee grounds. So the green materials are very easy to acquire. The brown materials take a little more ingenuity. There's most of the trees here are conifer trees, spruce trees and stuff like that, and the needles can be composted, but they take a lot longer to do all the saps and resins in them. If you can find an alder patch, those leaves decompose perfect. So anytime somebody was raking leaves and they had alder leaves or something, Pacific mountain ash or any tree that wasn't a conifer, even raspberry leaves will work. And I would pick up people's raked leaves, and you just have to get a little creative with it. But my philosophy with gardening is, if it costs more to grow it than it does to buy it in the grocery store, I try to find a better way to do it. I have learned that homegrown produce is leaps and bounds ahead of store-bought produce. I've never had tomatoes taste better than stuff that I grew or someone else I knew grew. I can't even eat them from the grocery store anymore. They're tasteless. So I always try to keep the cost down and finding ways to build soil as organically as possible and not have to use the pesticides and the fertilizers. I know there's a time and a place for them, but if I can avoid using them, I try to. So once I got the pile about 18 inches high, I built a cold frame over it, and I'm sure most of you know what cold frames and hoop houses are. How do I close this?
What is a cold frame?
I was thinking that you might be able to just do that.
No, that was
Oh,
some
I
of my
see.
stuff. I had these in order, but apparently I don't do that on jump drive.
Yeah.
Cold frame is, so I have the garden bed, and I just took 4 pieces of half-inch PVC and screwed them to the inside of one side, and then just bent it over and screwed it into the other side. So I had a frame. If this is your garden bed, I had 4 pieces of PVC looped over it, and then I took clear, mostly clear, plastic drop cloth from Walmart. The Husky brand, it was I think it was about $20 for the roll, and it was enough to do 2 of these beds. It's 25 feet long and I think 6 feet wide. So you can do several beds with one roll of it.
Did it take the wind very well?
It did, surprisingly. So I made mine with rigid sides. I probably wouldn't do that again. Well, I would say rigid. I took and cut out the hoop shape for the end and actually used Gorilla Tape, held it all through the winter until I took it down. That's good stuff. Just a little bit of Gorilla Tape holding the plastic down, and then I cut, I don't